It started with a broken sprinkler head and a crushed daffodil. Not a big deal, at first. I chalked it up to clumsy squirrels or maybe a stray dog. But then it happened again. And again. By the fourth morning, the corner patch of my front lawn looked like it had hosted a stampede. I checked the footage from my porch cam. It wasn't a squirrel. It wasn't a dog. It was a kid. A little boy with a Scooby-Doo backpack, cheap neon scooter, and a habit of cutting diagonally across my yard every morning on his way to school. He didn't just walk the sidewalk like every other child on the block. Nope. He zipped through my lawn like it was a shortcut programmed into his GPS. He even kicked up mulch like he was auditioning for a landscaping demolition derby. And the kicker? I recognized him. He was Karen's son. Yeah, that Karen. Moved in 2 months ago, 3 doors down. Drives a Volvo SUV she thinks gives her diplomatic immunity. You know the type, permanent sunglasses, athleisure clothes she's never sweated in, and a voice that sounds like it's always correcting you. So I walked over one afternoon to address it. Nicely. Hey, I notice your son's been cutting through my yard on his scooter. It's tearing up the grass. Could you have him stick to the sidewalk? She blinked. Once. Slowly. Then smiled. Oh, that's just Logan. He's 8. He's harmless. I'm sure he is, I said. But my sprinkler head wasn't. It snapped clean off yesterday. She let out a laugh. Come on, it's just grass. You're not going to yell at a child over some dirt, are you? No one's yelling. I'm asking for respect. That's when the smile faded and the Karen kicked in. She folded her arms and said, Look, if your yard wasn't so open, maybe he wouldn't think it's a path. I stared at her. Are you saying it's my fault? I'm saying if you don't want people walking on it, maybe you should put up a sign or something. Or, I don't know, a fence? And with that, she turned around and walked off, across my lawn. Didn't even blink. The next morning, not only did Logan cut across again, he brought a friend. 2 scooters. Twice the destruction. My flower bed looked like a war zone. I didn't say anything that day. I just watched. But that weekend, after I replaced my mulch for the second time and patched up the drip line with zip ties, I saw something that really set me off. Karen had set up a lawn chair. On my property. Right at the corner of my yard, where Logan always entered. She was sipping coffee, scrolling her phone, watching the boys zigzag through my grass like it was recess. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't carelessness. This was entitlement in its purest, most brazen form. I walked outside and stood at the edge of the porch. She looked up and raised her cup at me like we were sharing some neighborly moment. Morning, she chirped. I didn't answer. I just stared at the chair. My grass beneath it. My mulch flattened beneath her heels. She followed my gaze and smirked. It's just a patch. Chill out. I didn't say a word. Because there's a point when words stop working. When polite requests and HOA rules mean nothing to someone who's made it their mission to pretend you don't exist. And Karen wasn't just ignoring me. She was declaring war. By Monday morning, there was an envelope taped to my front door. Not mailed. Not hand-delivered politely. Taped, like some kind of citation on a broken-down car. The HOA letterhead was real. The content? Ridiculous. We've received a formal complaint alleging hostile behavior directed toward a minor. Please refrain from future confrontations and maintain a safe, welcoming environment for neighborhood children. Failure to comply may result in fines or mandatory mediation. I stood there rereading it 3 times. Hostile behavior? The only thing I'd said to Karen's kid was nothing. And the only thing I'd said to her was that I'd like my grass to stay on the ground and not be launched into orbit. But the phrase that made my blood boil? Welcoming environment for neighborhood children. Apparently my own front yard was now community property, and not welcoming enough. Later that afternoon, I emailed the HOA president, a guy named Leonard who wore fishing shirts to meetings and acted like HOA power came with a badge and a badge gun. I sent him security footage of the kids riding through my lawn, the crushed flowers, the sprinkler head damage. He replied with one sentence. Perhaps consider designating a corner walkway to help ease neighborhood foot traffic. Walkway. On my own private lawn. It was insane. But not as insane as what came next. Because I didn't install a community path, like Leonard basically ordered me to, the next letter came with a heavier tone. It warned of a pending vote to reevaluate property border designations to allow for shared green space access where necessary. I read that line about 8 times. They were threatening to reclassify part of my yard as public access. Because Karen's kid liked to scooter through it. I walked outside, pacing, trying to breathe through it. That's when I saw them again. Logan and a new friend, 2 scooters now, ripping through the corner like it was a skate park. Karen wasn't even pretending anymore. She stood at the end of her own driveway, arms crossed, watching them tear up my grass like it was a game. And then she waved. That same smug, tight-lipped, "I own this neighborhood" wave. I didn't wave back. 2 days later, it got worse. I woke up to the sound of laughter. Not the sweet kind. The kind you hear just before your nerves snap. Outside, in the same corner patch, was a foldable table, 3 balloons tied to a sprinkler head, and at least 6 children running around with party hats. Karen was throwing a birthday party. On the edge of my lawn. I walked out to the curb and just stared. Karen caught my eye and offered me a cupcake. "They're gluten-free," she chirped. "Hope you don't mind, we needed a little extra space. Your yard just flows so nicely with the sidewalk. Very inviting." I looked at the patch of dirt that used to be green. "Oh, and don't worry," she added. "We'll clean up." They didn't. By evening, there were crushed streamers, an empty juice pouch, and 2 plastic forks embedded in the soil like some kind of suburban archaeological dig. That was the moment the neighborhood turned. Not on Karen, on me. Because she was already going door to door with her version of events. I overheard it the next day. Walking back from the mailbox, I passed Mrs. Kaplan watering her geraniums. Normally she smiled. This time, she clutched the hose like it was a weapon. "I heard you shouted at a bunch of kids," she muttered. "What?" "Logan told his mom you screamed at them and threw a rock." I blinked. "I've literally never thrown a rock at anyone in my life." She shrugged. "Well, it's just a lawn. Maybe it's not worth all the fuss." There it was again. Just a lawn. I wanted to scream. I wanted to print out soil pH reports and diagrams showing the crushed irrigation line. But all I did was nod and walk away. That night, I sat on my porch watching the last light fade over my now half-dead lawn. A patch of it had yellowed entirely, the irrigation blown out from kids jumping on the edge of the line. And yet, no one saw that. They saw me as the bad guy. Because Karen had reframed the narrative. I wasn't a neighbor. I was the angry man shouting about grass. A villain in a low-stakes suburban drama she directed and starred in. I opened my HOA warning letter again and read it slowly. My house. My yard. But apparently not my story. And that's when I realized something. Karen wasn't trying to share space. She was trying to win space, control it, redefine it, own it in the eyes of everyone else. She wasn't using HOA power to protect the neighborhood. She was weaponizing the bylaws like fine print on a land grab. And if I let it slide, even once more, there wouldn't be a corner patch left to defend. Real quick, if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thinks your yard is public property, comment number 1. So I poured a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and Googled 4 words. Creative landscaping deterrent ideas. Because I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to reshape the battlefield. It started with a sketch on a diner napkin. 3 concentric loops, an irregular spiral, and a single, narrow entrance point, all designed with one purpose in mind. Keep them off my lawn. But I didn't want a fence. Fences scream aggression. Fences get cited by the HOA. Fences start wars. What I needed was something beautiful. Legal. Annoying. Something no HOA could argue with, and no scooter could conquer. So I called my Uncle Frank. Frank used to design botanical installations for theme parks. Now he spends most of his time arguing with strangers online about invasive species and why mulch is a scam. Perfect. You want to build a maze? He asked, squinting at my napkin. Technically, I said, I want to create a community-inspired pollinator-friendly hedge installation that happens to be very hard to walk through. Frank grinned. Now that's what I call sustainable warfare. We spent a weekend mapping out the exact dimensions using biodegradable twine and plastic tent stakes. Frank measured light exposure, soil depth, drainage angle, and, most importantly, scooter launch velocity. He even tested it. Rolled a Razor scooter down the hill from Karen's driveway, just to see how much force those kids were hitting my mulch bed with. It hit a sprinkler and flipped like it hit a tripwire. Frank nodded. They won't survive the second curve. By the end of the week, I had filled out a permit application with the city zoning office, listing my project as Native Species Visual Barrier for soil retention, stormwater management, and eco-education. I attached a full planting plan, native flora list, and a quote from a local nursery to make it look official. 3 days later, my project was approved. No HOA override. No objections. Nothing Karen could do but watch. And she did. The day the hedges arrived, 36 baby shrubs in biodegradable containers, she stood at the edge of her driveway in her lemon-colored yoga pants, arms folded, squinting like I was erecting a medieval catapult. What's all this? She called out. I smiled. Landscaping. Just trying to make the place more welcoming. Her lips twitched. It's going to ruin the flow of the block. Funny, I said. That's what you said when I asked your kid to stay off my property. Frank waved from behind the wheelbarrow. We're planting butterfly-friendly varieties. Pollinators love a maze. Karen snorted. A maze? You're kidding. I shrugged. Depends on your definition of kidding. She laughed. Right up until the 3rd week. By then, the shrubs had taken root. We'd woven in winding paths with bark chips and solar garden lights. At the center, Frank helped me install a circular bed of milkweed and lavender with a little ceramic sign that read, Resting Zone, Bees Welcome. But the real beauty was the layout. It looked like art. It functioned like punishment. There was no straight line across my yard anymore. No direct path. If you tried to cut through it, you'd wind up circling back on yourself, or worse, walking right into a patch of rosemary thorns. And here's the best part. It was all completely legal. Karen learned that the hard way. One morning I stepped outside just in time to hear it. Mom! I'm lost! Logan's voice echoed from somewhere inside the hedges. I peeked around the porch column and spotted the tip of his scooter poking out from behind a viburnum bush. He must have tried his usual shortcut and got trapped in the spiral. Karen came stomping over in her slippers, hair in a half-messy bun, yelling, Logan! Follow my voice! He couldn't. Frank had made the hedge path a figure-8 with a dead-end loop, just wide enough to tempt a shortcut, and just narrow enough to block line of sight. I leaned against the post and sipped my coffee. Karen finally pushed into the hedges herself, muttering under her breath, tripping on mulch, and brushing spiderwebs off her arm like she'd walked into Mordor. 10 minutes later, she emerged with Logan, red-faced and limping. This is harassment, she snapped. You've turned your yard into a trap. I held up the laminated approval from the city. Actually, it's a registered eco-sculpture. Educating kids about native biodiversity. Want a brochure? She stormed off. That afternoon, a letter appeared in my mailbox. Another HOA warning. Resident complaint received, unsafe landscaping obstructing pedestrian traffic and visibility. I replied with 3 attachments. My city-approved landscaping permit. A photo of the resting zone, bees welcome sign. A printed copy of the HOA's own rulebook, highlighting a clause that stated, Living installations under 4 feet in height are exempt from fence restrictions and may be used for artistic or educational purposes. They didn't reply. But Karen did. The next morning, she posted on the neighborhood forum. Is anyone else concerned that we're encouraging dangerous maze-like yards that could confuse or injure our children? Someone replied. You mean the yard your kid wasn't supposed to be in? Another added. I thought it was charming. My daughter loved the butterfly patch. And then, my favorite comment. Honestly, it's the most peaceful I've seen that corner look in years. Karen didn't respond again. Not online, anyway. But the message was clear. Her narrative was slipping. What she thought would embarrass me had backfired. The hedges were growing. The bees were buzzing. The kids started using the sidewalk again. And Karen? She started avoiding the front yard altogether. She'd scurry to her car, sunglasses on, pretending not to notice the ceramic bee sculptures Frank added next to the lavender. She didn't wave anymore. Didn't smirk. The shortcut was gone. And in its place stood something inconvenient, unwelcoming, and just the right amount of smug. Exactly like Karen. If you think the hedge maze was the perfect revenge, go ahead and like this video. By week 5 of the hedge maze era, Karen stopped pretending she was fine. Her morning walks had become speedruns. No more coffee in hand, no more polite greetings to neighbors. Just a tight ponytail, clenched jaw, and a pace that said, I'm holding it together barely. But rage doesn't dissolve. It ferments. And one morning it exploded. I found the ceramic, no trespassing, sign I'd tucked into the hedge's entry path. Snapped in half. Not fallen. Not weather-worn. Snapped cleanly, stem twisted, like someone had yanked it out and slammed it against something. Luckily, I'd anticipated something like this. Frank had insisted we place a small trail camera inside one of the taller bushes, just above eye level. Camouflaged inside a fake rock casing. If you're gonna build a maze, he'd said, expect a minotaur. So I checked the footage. There she was. Karen. Hoodie up. Late evening. Creeping through the maze with a flashlight and garden shears. She found the ceramic sign, yanked it out, stared at it like it had insulted her dog, then shattered it on the edge of a garden paver. She didn't even look around. Like she truly believed nothing and no one could ever touch her. She was wrong. I clipped the video, added timestamp overlays, and forwarded it to 2 places. The City Landscape Compliance Office, citing destruction of a marked eco-educational feature. The HOA Regional Oversight Committee, yes, it exists, citing targeted retaliation and harassment. And while I was compiling that report, I stumbled on something else entirely, almost by accident. The HOA newsletter showed up in my inbox that same week. Normally I don't read it, but the headline caught my eye. Spring HOA Budget Updates, Community Events and Expenditures. I clicked, and there it was, under Event Discretionary Spending. $327.49, Children's Outreach Printing. $159, Community Welcome Gifts. $92, Refreshments for Board Session. Vague. Too vague. Because, funny thing, there had been no official HOA board session that month. And there certainly hadn't been any children's outreach unless you counted Logan's birthday party on my lawn. I started asking around. Danielle, who lives 2 doors down and runs the neighborhood Facebook group, said it plainly. Karen prints flyers every time she gets mad. She calls it informational outreach. Last time it was about dog poop. This time I think it was about your hedges. I asked if she still had one. She did. Bright yellow. All caps. Pearly formatted. It read, Is this what we want? Dangerous yard mazes next to our children? Concerned resident. Except the footer read, Printed courtesy of HOA Communications Committee. She used HOA funds to print smear flyers about me. And then reimbursed herself for it. I dug deeper. I requested to see the last 6 months of meeting minutes and reimbursements. Per HOA bylaws, they're required to share upon request. At first, I got ignored. Then I got an email from Stuart, HOA treasurer and known Karen ally, that said, "Those documents are internal. We'll get back to you." I replied with a simple screenshot of the HOA bylaws. Records requested by any homeowner must be made available within 5 business days. The next morning, a folder showed up on my porch. Inside, printed spreadsheets, handwritten receipts, a pink post-it note that read, "Don't say my name. T." That's when I knew someone on the inside had turned. And the records? They told a story. Karen had reimbursed herself over $700 in board expenses over the last quarter, including $35.88 for volunteer refreshments, which matched the cupcakes she handed out on my property, $42.15 for community engagement signs, aka the warning posters she stuck near my hedges, and $110 for a professional landscaping assessment, which, based on the invoice, was a guy named Dave from Craigslist who mowed her own yard. This wasn't negligence. This was embezzlement dressed in yoga pants. I didn't shout. I didn't confront. I did what Karen never expected me to do. I documented. I copied everything, scanned the receipts, added the flyer, attached the video of her smashing the sign, and formatted the entire thing into a 20-page HOA abuse report. Then I submitted it, not just to the local HOA review board, but to the city's Neighborhood Integrity Division, which oversees associations in cases of potential financial misconduct. I didn't make noise. I made paper trails. And while I waited for the response, I noticed something in the air. Not fear. Not yet. But cracks. Karen's lawn started looking a little overgrown. Her garbage bins weren't rolled in on time. And for the first time since she moved in, she didn't show up to the monthly HOA meeting. The city's reply came in less than a week. 2 emails, one from the Neighborhood Integrity Division, confirming an investigation into HOA misuse of funds, and another from a compliance officer named Rosa who requested a meeting to verify documentation and interview affected residents. The fuse was lit. But I wasn't just counting on the city. I had one more move. I called a local attorney, Marcy Elias, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had once sued an HOA into dissolution. Her tagline on her website literally read, "You write fines. I write checks." I met her at a coffee shop, handed her the folder. She flipped through the flyers, photos, and receipts, nodding slowly. Classic abuse of position. "You want money, apology, or fire?" "All 3, I said. She grinned. Within 72 hours, a cease and desist letter was sent to both the HOA and Karen directly, demanding a formal written apology, full reimbursement of misused HOA funds, and a public retraction of all prior violations issued under Karen's influence. The kicker? We attached a clause for escalation. If they didn't comply within 10 business days, we'd be filing a civil suit for defamation, harassment, and retaliatory HOA action totaling $12,000 in damages. They had 10 days. But the neighborhood? They didn't wait. Word spread fast. Danielle posted a summary on the Facebook group, careful, non-accusatory, but clear enough. She never said Karen's name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Nancy, 2 doors over. Karen fined me $50 for having a visually disruptive garden gnome. A single mom, Jenna. She said my baby stroller was clutter. I paid the fine because I didn't want trouble. Even Mr. Halvorsen, the retired dentist who never speaks, emailed the HOA to ask where his violation fees from last year went. 7 neighbors. 8 separate incidents. All with one name behind them. Karen. The final HOA meeting of the season was standing room only. They held it at the local rec center instead of the community clubhouse, probably because no one wanted this circus spilling into someone's lawn. Karen showed up late, wearing sunglasses indoors, and a neck brace. Yes, a neck brace. It was beige, bulky, and completely unnecessary. But there she was, sitting stiffly like a courtroom extra on Judge Judy, flanked by Stuart and Helen like a dethroned queen with two terrified squires. Leonard, the HOA president, opened the meeting with an awkward cough. "We've received concerns about recent expenditures and procedural inconsistencies. Tonight we're, prepared to address those." Marcy stood. "On behalf of my client, I'd like to begin by stating that the hedge installation in question is fully legal, city-approved, and documented. Any attempts to intimidate, damage, or obstruct that project were violations of both HOA guidelines and state civil code." Karen opened her mouth, then thought better of it. Marcy wasn't done. "We are also prepared to present evidence of financial misconduct, fraudulent reimbursements, and abuse of enforcement powers tied to one specific individual's influence over this board." She didn't say Karen's name either. But the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Then she laid out the binder. Page by page. Flyers. Receipts. The camera footage of Karen destroying property. Even the quote from Craigslist Dave. "Yeah, she paid me cash to mow her yard. Thought it was a personal gig." Karen's hand shot up. "I was advised by board members to handle outreach independently." Marcy cut her off. "With no vote, no receipts, and HOA funds?" Karen clutched her neck brace like it might protect her from accountability. Then came the final blow. Marcy turned to Leonard. "My client has not only been harassed and falsely accused, but targeted with citations that were never formally reviewed. We demand full dismissal of those citations, repayment of all fines collected from affected neighbors, and the immediate resignation of any board member found to have approved such actions." Leonard blinked, then slowly turned to Stuart. Stuart looked at Karen. Karen adjusted her sunglasses and said nothing. But it didn't matter. Because at that moment, Danielle stood up. "I second the motion." Then Nancy. Then Mr. Halvorson, yes, even him. Within 5 minutes, the room erupted into a vote. Hands raised. Voices firm. Karen was out. Effective immediately, she was removed from her HOA position. And in an unexpected twist, the board voted to implement a new amendment. No citation could be issued without a second verified signature and photo documentation. They called it the Daniels Resolution. But when the newsletter came out, it had a different name. The Reynolds Amendment. A new path forward, literally. Because, in a delightful twist of irony, the community also awarded my hedge maze a small grant as part of a new neighborhood beautification and education initiative. That's right. The thing Karen tried to destroy? It won an award. I added a new sign to the maze entrance. This project made possible by pettiness, pollinators, and persistence. A few days later, Karen's house went quiet. No more flyers. No more complaints. No more early morning scooter rumbles. Just silence and a for sale sign staked quietly near the curb. She didn't say goodbye. No one expected her to. But the best part. 2 weeks after her departure, a young couple moved in. Friendly, engaged, and full of questions. They saw the maze and said, "This is genius." I handed them a flash drive. "What's this?" "Survival guide," I said. "For the HOA. And for Karen. Want more smart and satisfying HOA Karen stories? Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss one." They laughed. I didn't. Because legends never die. But sometimes they get replaced by something a whole lot healthier. Like native hedges. And neighbors who ask permission before stepping on your lawn. In the end, this wasn't just about hedges or scooters or HOA fines. It was about boundaries. The literal kind we plant in the ground, and the invisible kind we draw to protect our dignity. Karen thought being loud made her right. She thought rules were weapons, not protections. But when people misuse systems for control, it's not just petty, it's dangerous. The truth is, you don't have to raise your voice to stand your ground. Sometimes, the smartest way to fight back is with calm, paperwork, and a bit of creativity. A hedge maze. A paper trail. A united community. This story is a reminder: you have more power than you think, especially when you're backed by truth, patience, and neighbors who've had enough. So whether it's a lawn, a driveway, or your own peace of mind, don't let anyone walk over it like it doesn't matter. Stand firm. Document everything. And if needed, grow a maze. Not to trap others, but to show them there's a right way forward, and it doesn't run through someone else's yard.